Well, hello and welcome to the Merri-Cast, the show that puts you on the fast track to confidence in starting and growing your business. For my money, what follows is probably the most interesting and frankly emotional interview that we've done to date on the Merri-Cast, so much so that we've decided to edit it into two parts, and this is part one. So let me introduce you to Dr. Zareen Roohi Ahmed, the founder and CEO of GIF Wellness, which creates natural products that support well-being, champion social impact and environmental sustainability. And we talk a lot about that in part two, but oh my goodness, this interview revealed that Zareen is so much more than just another entrepreneur. Her story, and this first episode, is centred around an awful personal tragedy with the murder of her beloved daughter Halimah. The way in which Zareen channeled her grief into real purpose through the charity set up in her daughter's name is probably worth a whole series, let alone this podcast. Nevertheless, let's jump in at the start of what I hope you'll agree is a real roller coaster of an emotional journey.
Yeah, if you want to start from the beginning, then I was born in the Black Country in the West Midlands in a place called Stourbridge. And it was at that time, I was born in the house, like not in a hospital, because my mum had recently come from Pakistan, recently meaning like 10 months before I was born. And my dad had been here for a lot longer, since the mid-50s. And he was part of that cohort of Pakistanis and other Asians that were invited over to help rebuild the country after the Second World War. And then my mum came over at the beginning of 1966, and I was born sort of 9-10 months later. And I think she was too nervous to go to the hospital because she was still quite new in this country, and you know the struggles of the immigrants at that time. It wasn't as PC as it is now, I guess. But yeah, I was born in the West Midlands. I'm very much a Dudley girl, West Midlands Black Country girl. My dad went to work. He worked with Lenny Henry's mum in the same factory as Lenny Henry's mum, and we'd see her in the street in Dudley, and because that's where we moved to shortly after I was born, and she'd say Mo, and from across the road his name was Mohammed, and she called him Mo. Everyone called him Mo at work. And so I mean, years later at Loughborough University in the student union, Lenny Henry was performing, and I kind of did a Lenny it's me because he went to school with my brother, and there's my claim to fame.
Oh well, I mean, you have your own claim to fame because of the business that you've sort of developed and so on. But what about so as you were sort of going through, I don't know, the school system and then the university sort of system, I mean, what kind of person were you? Were you sort of was entrepreneurialism on your mind, or was it the furthest thing from your mind?
Furthest thing. I was one of 6 siblings, 4 sisters and 2 brothers, and I was in the middle. I had an older brother and sister who were born in Pakistan, and then I was the eldest of the gang of 4 that were born here. And so I was like the leader and protector of those younger 4. And at school, well, we moved from Dudley, which was very multicultural, back to kind of near Stourbridge, a place called Brierley Hill, and it was very white. And I was the first non-white person in my school, and which was scary and stressful and everything. So I had to make my mark and toughen up, and my solace was the art room. My place of peace and getting away from everything was the art room. And I mean, I did well. I did well in school. It was my I was in survival mode all the time. There was a lot of racism. There was a lot of sort of the wrong kind of attention all the time, either from the teachers giving me the lead in the school play when I didn't want it, but I was the token brown person, so like, let's give her the lead. Or or the opposite, and hate and racism and that sort of thing. So as my younger siblings joined the school and I was a prefect in the fifth year, I was very much their protector, and I was hard. Like, you didn't want to mess with my brothers and sisters because you'd have to deal with me. It was that kind of, I needed to be the big sister. And then I went to art college and then Loughborough University, and studying graphic design and illustration. And I was an illustrator and just loved anything creative and artistic. And at home we had a quite a traditional sort of Pakistani Muslim home life, and I've always been quite spiritual. But and so we had this mix of cultures, a very English person on one hand, but really rooted and passionate about my mum and dad's culture as well. And it wasn't until much later in my late teens that I went to Pakistan for the first time, because they couldn't afford to take us all, so they'd take one at a time. And it was incredible. And, seeing my relatives over there and cousins who looked like me and sounded like me and things like that. And just, the thing is, when I go there, it feels like home. And when I come here, it feels like home as well.
It's possible for both to be true, isn't it? That
100%.
you feel
Yeah,
sort of part of
of
part of
course.
both. Were your family back, back in Pakistan, or your immediate family in England? Were they part of an entrepreneurial family? Was entrepreneurialism
Oh,
in
yeah.
the genes?
Yeah, I mean, mum and dad had to be resourceful because, it was shortly after the partition of Pakistan and India when the British left it in a real mess. And a lot of my family had to move from the Indian side to the Pakistani side and lost everything. It was really difficult for them. So they had them when naturally, and I feel that we are naturally very resourceful people, because you then had, when my dad came over here in the 50s, he had to find work. He had to, and he was sending money back for his younger brother to go to university. And he became an architect who was one of the founders of Islamabad, the capital, the new capital that they built. And he built all of the. So my uncle was responsible for the underground water system, because in Islamabad you have the backdrop of the mountains, the Himalayas, the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. You don't want to be putting wires and things above ground, so everything's underground. And he designed the water system and the electrical system that went underground and things like that. I didn't know that until much later.
I mean, that's
Um,
that's amazing of itself. I mean, it's probably worthy of a
yeah,
whole interview of itself, like the background
mm,
and sort of history
yeah,
of that. What I mean, I'm struggling to see so there you are. There's young Zareen, sort of, going to Loughborough, passionate about art and so on. And then I'm seeing in 2012, founder and CEO of GIF Wellness. I mean,
mm.
just tell me how that sort of
So,
transformation happened. I mean, obviously, and the order in which things happened for you, and which led you to that point.
so Trevor, I met my husband at Loughborough, and we got married, and he was from Derby, so I moved to Derby, and had two children, Halima and Fazan. My eldest, Halima, my daughter, and Fazan, who was 15 months younger than Halima. And me and Halima were exactly the same from the start. Like, people would think we were sisters because I had a very young as well. And we looked alike, we loved the same things. She was also very creative, and we were both really into community work and charity work. And her dream was to do charity work. She would say to me as she was growing up, Mum, you're going to have to find me a rich husband, because doing what I want to do. I'm never going to make any money, because she just wanted to do charity work. Whenever there was a disaster or anything like that, she would be baking cakes and selling them at school. And, she had certificates from like the Red Cross and, other charities, and she subscribed to UNICEF. And in her, her statement, her UCAS statement, when she was applying for uni and things, she said that she had ambitions of becoming a UN ambassador for peace and all these sorts of things, and that she wanted to alleviate poverty. So Halimah started her dream course at the University of Nottingham Trent University to study international relations and third world development, and was due to go to Gambia in her second year to work there for a year. And at the time, I was the CEO of a national charitable organisation, an umbrella body called the BMF, the British Muslim Forum, that was set up after the 7/7 bombings. So my career had gone from graphic design and illustration to community artwork, doing arts and murals in communities and with schools, which I absolutely loved. And then from there to urban regeneration, so using art and leisure to regenerate inner city communities. And then from that, I moved into charities, the charity sector, and working for government organisations, a whole range of organisations that I worked for. So it was quite a breadth of experience. And in each job, when I worked for the NSPCC for 5 years, and I was their regional manager, fundraising and marketing. And then for the Experience Corps, which was a government Quango organisation. And it was while I was still working for the Experience Corps, and it was all about volunteering. It was about getting people aged over 50 into volunteering. I kind of progressed to being their national operations director, managing several teams around the country. And it was to get people aged over 50 into volunteering as part of Tony Blair's goal to get 1 million people into volunteering. So it was kind of a recruitment agency between organisations in the inner city areas that needed help, and people over 50 who have more skills and experience than everyone else and maybe retired early, and then matching them. And fascinating job. And then when the contract finished for that, me and the chief executive of the Experience Corps, Maggie Sample, we carried on working together and doing sort of consultancy work across different government departments. And didn't do it for very long. And I was headhunted. The 7/7 bombings had happened, and I was headhunted by these religious leaders from the Muslim community who were looking for someone who could act as who could head their organization that they'd just set up, to really act as a conduit, a face between the community and the government and the media. So in between, and being there to kind of, as a peacemaker, really, and representing the mosques and the Muslim organizations, and, making it known to the wider public that, that they weren't terrorists, basically, and having to travel across the world, really, as well, representing British Muslims. And I'd never worked in a religious organisation before, but my father-in-law was a leader in the Muslim community, and everyone knew him.
I mean, just out of interest on that one, I mean, the narrative at that time must have been quite hard to sort of fight against, if you like, sort of in terms of getting that message across.
Indeed, it was extremely tense, and in our community, because from being brought up in a completely English environment and going to college and going through my gothic phase and then my punk phase and then my all the other phases that teenagers went through, I married into a very conservative Muslim family. And yeah, my father-in-law was kind of one of the first leaders of the community who built the mosque in Derby and was very well known. And so when I was approached by these scholars to head up this organization, they all knew my father-in-law. Oh, in fact, the interview took place at the back of the Leicester Mosque, and there was me perched on this stool with my Apple Mac or something, giving a presentation about my vision for the Muslim community over the next 5 years. And there were about 7 of them with their long beards on these sofas and armchairs around me, kind of talking to each other about me and about, isn't she so and so's daughter-in-law, and and then I'd have to switch from English to Urdu to clarify things. And then the azan went, the call for prayer went, and they just went. They just
you lost your audience.
They just got I lost my audience. And then they came back and sort of carried on. And then the food arrived. And I like my spicy food, Trevor. But this food, I was crying, it was, my nose was running. And I thought, is this part of the test, But anyway, I got that job. It was like one of those Japanese endurance tests, that you see on.
So you're doing all of these things, all these incredible experiences. All of them, just must have been great in terms of learning and setting the stage for things. I mean, but then just maybe if you just say a bit more about, you had your son and your daughter, and and your daughter was at university, and then unfortunately there was tragedy.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I was at the pinnacle of my career at that point. I was traveling around the world, and Halima had just started university, as I say, at Nottingham Trent, to study international relations and third world development and global politics, and wanted to specialize in third world development. She turned 19 at the beginning of November 2007. So she started in October, and then she turned 19, and she had been going to university 6 weeks, and it was the 26th of November, and she was abducted on her way to university by a mental health patient and murdered. And the night before, we'd just come back from London. I was speaking on a stage. We were there for two days, and I was speaking at the Global Peace and Unity event at the Excel to an audience of 20,000, and alongside the chief rabbi and the archbishop and various politicians, and Sadiq Khan was there, and all these leaders were there, the Bishop of Jerusalem. And then, we came back from there that night, on Sunday night, drove back, me, my husband, and my son and my daughter. And she'd been manning my stand and looking after my volunteers, and really coming into her maturity and her, she was so happy that she'd got onto her dream course. And, the next day I went to work. She texted me and told me that she had an assignment to work on with her friend on campus, and she was going in the afternoon, and that, could I pick up Fazan, her brother, from college and from sixth form, and we had that exchange, and then nothing. And normally we'd be texting each other all day, and what's for dinner and what should we do after, and yeah, she disappeared. And so, I mean, the funeral happened within days, because it was on the national news and things like that. And because of my position at the BMF, we had all these delegations coming from different parts of the country, and, orchids and cards from government and Downing Street and things like that as well. It was really surreal. It was really surreal. And I just kind of went into autopilot. crisis management mode.
Right, right.
And I didn't really let it all out and cry for months, for weeks, And I was just busy making sure that everyone else was okay. My son and my husband, my parents, his
Mm,
parents, cousins and brothers and sisters. But one thing that I did know almost immediately, and it kind of saved us, this realization did. And it was that I knew that I would have to focus my attention on fulfilling the promise that I'd made to Halimah, which was that after she graduated, that me and her would do charity work together. So she
mm,
made me promise that, I should have told you this before, telling you what happened, was that me and Halimah, we had a pact that after she graduated, that we would work together. And she said, Mum, I don't care what you do, what you're doing at the time, what your job is, you and I have to set up our own organisation and do charity work and hopefully some kind of social enterprise, a business for good. And we used to really geek out on things like Anita Roddick's story, where cottage industries helping women in poor parts of the world, and that sort of developing our own products and handmade products and things like that, and at the same time helping those in need. So I knew straight away that that's what I would do.
and in a way, although you couldn't physically work together, in a way you did kind of work together because you set up the Halimah Trust, trust in her name, which kind of shone the light and the path, if you like, for what sort of happened next. So you sort of built
Exactly.
that up and so on. So I suppose she was there in spirit, sort of working with you in that sense, perhaps.
Halima is more alive now than she ever was for me. She's, you know, in every breath I take. She's in everything I do. She's in
Mm.
every product that I develop. And it's her voice in my head. And I so often, even, my husband often says, you sounded just like Halima then when you said that. You look
Mm.
just like Halima today, you know,
Yeah.
when you wear, and I still kind of, we shared clothes and everything, we're the same. And, I still wear her things. I wear her pajamas, which is really weird, but I do. and, and you know, so yeah, I spent the next 3 years after it happened. I left my job, and it was coming to the end of its term anyway, and I could have renewed it, I guess, my contract, but I knew that I wouldn't be ready for that kind of job,
Yeah.
the drop of a hat, ready for the media or that sort of thing. And I just knew that I had to do this. So I spent the next 3 years fundraising and focusing on building a school in Pakistan for orphaned and needy girls, which was our first sort of flagship project of the Halimah Trust.
So yes, I mean, just tell us a bit more about the evolution of that journey. So that was in 2007, I think, and and
Yes.
then and then
So we
so
started
you
the charity early in
yeah,
2008. And
right.
my son, who just turned 18 in February 2008, was the first chair of the charity. He wanted to. He said, he needed something to focus on. And so we made him the chair of the charity. And he was actually the youngest chair of any charity in the UK. And he was in the Charity Commission's newsletter as the youngest ever person to chair, because he'd just turned 18, and you're not allowed to chair a charity before the
So
age of 18. And gosh, it was a whirlwind, really. We just threw ourselves into it and began fundraising. My husband Ash and Fizan, they climbed Kilimanjaro and things like that. And we had various fundraising dinners and went to Pakistan for the groundbreaking of the where the foundations would be laid for this school. And then the school was launched it was inaugurated in April 2011. And it really was a healing process, the fundraising and the connecting with our community in that way. We saw the best of humanity during those years, during
Yes.
those, especially in the first stages. We saw the best of humanity. We had donations from strangers from faraway places, and especially the people in our city in Derby, and and all of the Midlands really. It was incredible. It was so moving and heartwarming and reassuring after what had happened.
Yes.
And and then in April 2011, we inaugurated this incredible school. It's a big school.
Yeah.
It's 400. It was 400 girls at the start, and they were girls who'd been caught up in the earthquake the year before in Kashmir and had lost entire families. They were at school when the earthquake happened, and landslides covered their just completely covered their villages. Their villages disappeared, and they were left all alone. And we saw little girls with grey hair. We saw
Mm.
girls who were very badly, anemic and thin, and had been in orphanages there somewhere. And they were in this incredible building, beautiful state of the art building. And, with all these new sisters, with this new family, and we had doctors checking them all over. And then a few days later, I was there in the airport, just with them in my heart, and everywhere in the school. It was like I could hear Halimah. I could hear
Mm.
her giggling when I heard girls giggling together,
Yeah.
and and it still is like that whenever I go back. The girls there, they say, think of us as your daughters now. And I do.
Yeah. Are there girls who went there who are now grown up with daughters of their own who are
Yeah.
soon or at the school
Yes,
wow.
yes. And we fund weddings, we fund scholarships to university. We recently had one of the girls that we did a scholarship for her to study astrophysics in Japan, doing a PhD in astrophysics in Japan. Another one just graduated from Bagh University in Kashmir from in zoology. And all these fascinating scientists that are coming out of the school. And now we have a college there as well, because who was going to send them to college? So we had to build a college next door, and we have 1,100 girls on the campus now. And we're currently, we've just launched phase 3 of the campus, the Halimah campus, which is to build another school next to the original school, because there are too many girls for that school now, and we need to split the primary and secondary
Mm.
age girls,
Yeah.
so that they have space. But
I mean,
it's really thriving.
yeah, that's absolutely fantastic, and and Lima is kind of is there in all of it, in your thoughts and their thoughts, I guess,
Please.
as well. What about the evolution then? I mean, at the same time, I mean, we've just now getting on to sort of talking about gift wellness, and that was you set that up sort of 13 years ago. I mean, is there a direct connection between those things, or was it just
Of
another set of
course.
ideas you had? I mean, what was there method in
Completely.
the madness, or was there madness in the method? I mean,
So,
how did it
Trevor,
happen?
so I'm sitting in the airport lounge on my way back to England, having just inaugurated the first Halimah School of Excellence, it's called, with them in my heart, and thinking and looking out from the airport in Lahore Airport. I could see the Badshahi Mosque, the Mughal building, and it was early morning and the mist. I remember it vividly, and thinking to myself, I've reached this milestone. It's been very healing, but now what? What do I do now? And almost kind of panicking and thinking, oh gosh, because it was a kind of a survival strategy. It was something for me to focus on and to keep me connected to Halima. And I picked up a magazine to distract myself. I think it was Time magazine. And it opened at this article about women in the Zatari Syrian refugee camp on the border of Syria and Jordan. And it described their plight of how they were forced to tear strips off the bottom of their dresses, their abayas, they're called, to fold up into makeshift sanitary pads and all the other horrific things they were going through. But when I read that, the article was about their menstrual plight, of how they had to manage or how they were unable to manage their periods, and that they were traveling from place to place, and and they weren't. This issue was overlooked by all of the aid agencies. And when I read that, Trevor, it hit me like a steam train. I don't know if I actually stood up. It felt like I stood up, and it's still in my head. I kind of stood up. It was a moment, where I saw myself giving pads to these women in these refugee camps with my own hands. And it's still, when I go there to that moment, it still gets me. It has the same effect,
Yeah.
And I heard Halimah in my head, Mum, this is what we're doing next. And I knew that that's what but I didn't know how. I'd never done business. I'd never been in the private sector in that way before. But what I knew was that the end result was me giving pads to women in refugee camps.
Right.
That's what I knew. And that was the birth of Gift Wellness.
Wow, that felt very emotional for me as the interviewer, let alone for Zareen and all that she's had to endure. The spirit and courage that she found in the face of tragedy is quite unbelievable, and I don't think I could be that strong given those circumstances. And that moment of clarity at the end there, Zareen heard her daughter tell her, this is what we're doing next. The clarion call to start up Gift Wellness. And that's where we will start part 2 of this very special interview with Zareen, Roohi, Ahmed. So get ready for part 2, and thank you to our growing band of listeners. We love the human connection we're making here and the great feedback we're getting on the show. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate and review through your usual podcast provider. And if you want to find out more about the Merri-Cast, look for me, Trevor Meriden, or our business Merribourne on merribourne.co.uk. Until then, thanks for listening.